Alright, so this lesson just goes over 10-3. Hopefully yesterday we got to some of these parts. So I'm just going to go over one or two examples. You should already have these in your notes. Hopefully we got to them. For number one, the idea is that right here, the square root of 2's, you can kind of think of that as almost a variable. Like, we're not going to change anything underneath the square root. We can just combine the parts that are in front, the coefficients that are in front, I guess you could call them. You can combine those, and then the square root of 2 just kind of comes along for the ride. The way they kind of show this in the book looks like this. So we took the parts that are in front, so the 2 and the negative 3. 2 minus 3 is negative 1 times the square root of 2. So that's just how you do those problems again. Again, if the radicands are different, we can't combine them, so this negative square root 5 will have to stay at the end. I can combine these two parts though, so negative 2 plus 3 times the square root of 6 minus the square root of 5. So this becomes 1 times the square root of 6 minus 1 times the square root of 5. If you don't put that 1 there, that's fine. Not that big of a deal. Here we have simplifying, so sometimes we might have to simplify. First we did this for 10-2. So when we simplify, your goal is to figure out what is a perfect square. So here, this is a negative 1. I can break down the square root of 45 into the square root of 9 and the square root of 5. Here, this is the negative 3. And I'm going to break down the square root of 20 into the square root of 4 and the square root of 5. From there, I have negative 1 times, this is 3. Square root of 5 is not a perfect square, so that just drops down. This just drops down to be negative 3. This drops down to be 2 because the square root of 4 is 2. And this drops down to be the square root of 5. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3 times the square root of 5. We have minus 6 times the square root of 5. And now it's just the same thing here. You have negative 3 minus 6 times the square root of 5. That's negative 9 times the square root of 5. That's that problem right there. We should have got through that yesterday. If we didn't, we didn't. And now here's kind of the new stuff that I felt like we weren't going to get to. And it's multiplying radical expressions. This is like the non-FOIL. You just have like one part. So what we have to do is just distribute. So we're going to multiply the square root of 6 times the square root of 6. Well, that's the square root of 36. And then we're going to do the square root of 6 times a positive square root of 5. So that's going to be our square root of 30. Well, the square root of 36 is a perfect square. That's 6 plus the square root of 30. And the last part is you have to just check, can I break down the square root of 30? Can I simplify the square root of 30 to be a perfect square? 30, let's see here. So you have 1 and 30, that doesn't work. 2 and 15 doesn't work. 4 is a perfect square, but that doesn't work. Okay. 6 and 5 doesn't work. It doesn't work out, so this is just our final answer then. Alright. For 11, we're going to distribute the 3 times the square root of 6 times the negative 4 times the square root of 3. So remember, you do the outside, so negative 4 times 3 is negative 12, and then you multiply the insides, and you get the square root of 18. Then you do that same thing with the second part. So we have 3 times 4, which is 12, times the square root of 6. All right. From here now, we can break some of these things down. 18 can get broken down into the square root of 9 and the square root of 2. The negative 12 is just going to drop down. And then the negative 12 is going to drop down again. This turns into just 3. This drops down to the square root of 2. Can't really do anything here. Can't break down the square root of 6, so this just drops down. And then I have negative 36 times the square root of 2 plus 12 times the square root of 6. And I can't combine them because they're radicands. The numbers underneath the square roots are not the same. Last part then, we have multiply radical expressions need to FOIL. Alright. So here's our 13, 14. Now either call it FOIL or double distribute. All right, so the first thing, we do 2 times -4, which is -8. And then we're going to go 2 times the square root of 3, which is a positive 2 times the square root of 3. And then we're going to start with the square root of 3, multiply that with the -4. So that's plus a -4 square root of 3. And then we're going to do the square root of 3 times the square root of 3, which is the square root of 9. All right, we can do a little bit of simplifying here. So we have -8. I can simplify this. So that would be plus a -2 times the square root of 3, plus the square root of 9 is 3. Well, I can combine these now. So that's -5 plus -2 times the square root of 3. You could leave your answer like this, or you could just say it's -5 minus 2 times the square root of 3. All right. For 14, it's the same idea. It just looks a little bit different. This really means right here, the square root of 5 plus the square root of 2, and that's being multiplied with the square root of 5 plus the square root of 2. All right, so we have a situation like this. Again, we're going to double distribute, so we're first going to do right there. So the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 25. Then we go the square root of 5 times the square root of 2, which is the square root of 10. We're going to do that right here as well. So that's plus the square root of 10 again. And then we have the square root of 2 times the square root of 2, which is the square root of 4. This breaks down into 5. These we can combine. Now it's 1 and 1, so we really have 2 times the square root of 10, and this breaks down into just 2. We then can combine the 2 and this 5 to get 7 plus 2 times the square root of 10. All right, other than that then, at the end of, so we'll start 10-4 on Friday. So tomorrow will be a review. Your quiz is Thursday. We will have a little partner quiz now. This needs to be done in class. You can use your notes. You just need a partner.